Shadow the Hedgehog is one of the most famous characters in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. After his fan-favorite introduction in Sonic Adventure 2, he's had a bit of a rough time keeping his character intact, as well as his mainline game status. In this video, I'm going to analyze why I believe this is one of, if not the best characters in the franchise in terms of writing and overall storytelling, and how contrary to popular belief, his character never fell, but instead had an unfortunate misstep. This is Shadow the Hedgehog, a true hero. Let's start off with what may be kind of a no-brainer, that being Sonic Adventure 2. I won't go over the story as odds are you already know what it is if you're watching this video, but let's go over the main character arc Shadow goes through in Sonic Adventure 2. A common thing that people tend to forget about is that Gerald Robotnik created the ultimate lifeform prototype for curing Maria of a disease. Maria's disease is vague, but it's made clear that her life is unfortunately in danger in the Sonic Adventure 2 manual. This aspect of the story is without a doubt criminally underused, as it adds personal stakes and reasoning for Shadow's creation as well as the prototype before him. Not to mention, it adds even greater characterization for Gerald Robotnik to humanize him even further. But as I was saying, this is Shadow's beginning, his relationship with Maria. She's teaching him to learn, to be kind and caring, and doing her best to help him figure out his own place in the world. Shadow and Maria, without a doubt, have such a great story and were robbed of screen time in Sonic Adventure 2, but I can at least understand that maybe it wouldn't have been easy to be so ambitious on the Sega Dreamcast. To be fair, more screen time would have been nice and built a greater connection to these characters and their backstory. It isn't completely necessary, as the point of the relationship was shown fine enough. But I do think that Maria's disease should have explicitly been stated in the game, via extending a cutscene or adding another flashback entirely. Over the course of Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow misinterprets Maria's final wish and attempts to destroy humanity. This is just so good, because everything that he does throughout the story you can tell is not because he himself is an evil person, but instead it's all because it's out of a place of love. A love for someone whom he considered family. Maria was practically all he had, and he'll do everything in his power to get revenge for humanity's wrongdoings and fulfill a promise. This excellently leads to the viewer sympathizing with Shadow, making Amy's plea for help and Shadow remembering Maria's true promise, what she really wanted, all the more impactful. He takes one last stand against the Bio-Lizard in his newly acquired super form and defeats it side by side with the main person who impeded his previous goal. Working alongside Sonic cements the fact that Shadow at his core has changed because his mission has changed. This is without question the best character introduction, development, and redemption that the series has ever seen. The only comparable thing to this is probably Gamma in Sonic Adventure 1, but even so, that's more, I suppose, poetic in terms of its execution. This is a deceptively simple story for a character, but allow me to explain why this is never a bad thing. In my previous video essays, I practically preached that simplicity allows for more complexity. But before I go on a rant, just listen to these words by Edward D. Bono in his book, Simplicity. Quote, "Simplicity is elegant and provides easier and simpler ways to make and do things." End quote. This is why Shadow the Hedgehog works for a series like this, because on paper, it is easy to understand for kids, but the deeper you dive into the lore, the more layers appear, and the more compelling and emotionally powerful the climax of the arc becomes. Call me a fanboy, call me an overanalyzer, call me anything you want, but nothing you can say can ever change how utterly fantastic, ambitious, and most importantly, well told the story of Shadow the Hedgehog's redemption truly is. But what happens after that arc? Well, it's a simple question, but the answer is more complicated than you'd think. Shadow was supposed to stay dead. He was a one-off character, but due to justifiable fan outcry for his return, he was brought back in Sonic Heroes. Here's where things get messy, but lucky for me, it's for a dumb and easy to explain reason. Shadow lost all his memory, and when found by Rouge, she was shocked, but then she, nor does anybody else, tell him anything about his past. Like, who thought this was a good idea? It's by far the most aggravating part of Sonic Heroes' plot, which is insane because of how back to basics it went with its storytelling. We did find out that Shadow clones exist, though. Yep, that's it. Clones are shown throughout the story, and the last cliffhanger of Team Dark shows a room of clones that implies that Shadow might not even be the same guy from Adventure 2. Now, I'm not sure if they legitimately considered starting fresh with a new Shadow and a new story, and the only reason I didn't bother fact-checking is because of how dumb that is, and of course, because of our next game we have to look at, Shadow the Hedgehog. This game is, well, confused. I won't go into gameplay, who knows, one day I might do a review on it, but as of now, I'm just going to look at it from a storytelling perspective. This game and its narrative tries to have its cake and eat it too. If this game was a non-canon ball of angst and craziness, then fine, honestly. From a narrative standpoint, then yeah, that's fine. But even though it is a spin-off game, there was no doubt this game was meant to be canon. Canon being parts of a story that are officially acknowledged as continuity in the story. Now, why do I say this? Well, even though the Sonic canon is highly questionable, there are lots of ways to give half-baked answers, and it all kinda connects. But the reason Shadow is unfortunately entirely canon is because of its ending. I do believe that what I said about the game being a non-canon ball of angst and craziness all on its own is still to an extent the product we got. But, and this is a big but, the game has a final story segment that treats the game as canon. Although not explicitly said what version of the previous story is real, the story's ending itself is without a doubt canon due to its flat-out statement of Shadow being the true Shadow from Sonic Adventure 2. The problems this brings is that we have no narrative to follow. Sure, we got a pretty cool climax with an awesome and quite frankly relieving reveal of Shadow's identity, but nothing to hook us to stick around long enough to see it. Shadow the Hedgehog being split up into multiple non-canon variations of the story, honestly, is just an awful way to set up the game. Because that means that the player who knows that there is a canon final story segment that, in my opinion, is worth at least playing one time through, they know that nothing they're doing matters. The player's decision, their motivation to keep playing through the game and find the rest of the story is not there, because they no longer have a narrative to follow, because they know that they have to complete several narratives that don't impact the real story. And that just doomed Shadow the Hedgehog as soon as it came out. Now you may be asking, how did Shadow develop? And that's the problem here. After Adventure 2, the story for Shadow wasn't given the proper focus and long-term treatment it seemed they wanted to give it. And if they meant for it to turn out how it did, well then, that is just a nosedive in terms of story quality. But finally, I can talk about the Shadow the Hedgehog I love again. I say this because after SA2, Shadow was nothing more than an empty shell, with no character other than, well, brooding. In other words, that is not Shadow, but this is Shadow. Sonic 06, y'all know the drill, but just to clarify, this is considered one of the worst Sonic games for its technical mess of coding, creating bugs and glitches around every corner. While my own opinion on the game is quite different overall, I do see where most people come from with most complaints, but for context, Sonic 06 was meant to be a total reboot. All of the same characters, but with none of the backstory or baggage from the previous games 15 years prior. While this is true, it was totally useless. When I was younger, I didn't know it was meant to be a reboot, and taking all the 15 years of ongoing story do nothing but enhance every character moment in which this game shines. And lucky for us, Sonic Generations does confirm that 06 did in fact happen, and I like to compare this to something like the Avengers movies, because regardless of their story quality, it's the individual moments with our favorite characters that elevate the story to new heights, and Shadow's moments are my favorite in this game. This is Shadow working for Gun, which only kinda makes sense because of the reboot aspect, but this is such an amazing position for this character. He's always on the front lines, helping, saving, fulfilling his promise to Maria alongside Rouge and Omega. he is right where we left him in Sonic Adventure 2 in terms of goals and personality. A clean slate, if you will. Over the course of the game, he's brought face to face with time travel, demons, and honestly, gods. But he still has the strength and resolve to take it all on no matter the odds. So instead of just powering him up more, it's all a conflict that Shadow has to deal with internally. He is told as the ultimate life form that the world will turn on him, that Shadow in the future will forever be feared and hated due to his strength. Understandably, this shakes Shadow, but because of Team Dark and his friends, Rouge, Omega, Sonic, everyone who has made him who he is, Maria, his promise, that is what drives him. That is what makes Shadow a hero. Lastly, let's talk about his treatment nowadays. To be honest, there isn't a lot to talk about here. In the Archie comics, he was without a doubt great, right where we left him off in terms of 06 in terms of characterization. But other than that, he wasn't used in anything aside from, well, Sonic Riders. But years later, we finally got our first chance to play as Shadow in over a decade. But our first real story with Team Dark as well. I'm of course talking about Sonic Forces. Say what you will about the game, but this Shadow, I'm just gonna say it, I love it. This is what I crave in Shadow's character. He's an active character doing his best to protect and be a hero alongside those he's close with, who he cares for. He isn't shut off and angsty. Not to mention, his more cocky, fun side shines through a lot more here. Which is something that legitimately makes me enjoy this characterization of Shadow just as much, if not a little bit more than 06, because he is open and does have a fun side, but knows when to focus and take things seriously. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same thing for the current comics. IDW Shadow is nothing more than an angry, shut-off, angst-ridden caricature of the true depth and personality he once had. Instead of helping his friends, he often rushes straight to the final boss, driven by nothing more than ego, and according to most reports, Sega is the one to fault here, which I 100% believe, as Ian Flynn, the writer, knows Shadow the Hedgehog, as he wrote some of his best moments in the Archie series. And I don't like to demonize Sega, but this unfortunately sounds like a decision that I wouldn't be surprised if they honestly made. Shadow the Hedgehog, I can only hope continues off from where he left off in 06, and, well, I guess, more accurately, Sonic Forces. With more importance in the Sonic cast of characters, as well as more prominence in the narratives depending on what story they're deciding to tell. Hopefully, one with more ambition next time. Shadow is not an edgelord, nor is he a villain. Shadow is a person who wants nothing more than to save and help others because that's who he is. It's who Maria helped him to become. It's what Maria would have wanted. This was the promise he made to her.